It's clear that in the right moment, a pause can be just what's needed in a conversation. But did you know that a pause can be powerful in a presentation as well? Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because I'll be happy to explain to you just how important pausing can be.
A Pocket Size Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
One of the greatest gifts an audience can give to a speaker can't be found online or in a store. It doesn't cost a penny, and anyone can offer it up at just about any time. It's painfully simple, and yet frequently needs to be earned. The greatest gift an audience can give a speaker is a question. See, questions can help us determine if our message is getting through. Questions can help us determine the attitude of the audience. Questions can help us sustain interest in our message. The list of benefits goes on and on. Not every audience walks into a presentation dying to ask questions. It's natural for audiences to be uncertain of the safety of asking questions or unconvinced that the presenter genuinely wants to be asked questions. The easiest way to teach an audience that questions are welcome is to address questions received in a courteous manner while sincerely expressing your appreciation. That often does the trick, but what happens when no questions are being asked? That's when presenters ask questions of the audience, and here's where the power of the pause once again comes into play. A lot is riding on this moment within a presentation, although asking an audience question certainly seems simple enough. However, it's what we do after we ask the question that gets us into trouble. You see, our malfunctioning internal clock is at it again. If you think we're uncomfortable with periods of silence in a normal conversation, when we're in front of an audience, that internal clock runs even faster. We are so uncomfortable with silence that our internal clock runs about 4 times faster than a real clock. What feels like 4 seconds to you is actually about 1 second on a real clock. It gets tricky when you ask for questions from an audience and can sound something like this. Are there any questions? Well, great, let's move on. Not only will you not get any questions by moving too quickly, you can run the risk of antagonizing your audience, and that might even cause your audience to turn on you. After all, they do have questions they're not getting answered, and your misguided attempt to make room for their questions feels disingenuous to them. You can see how annoyed they may get. Here's the solution, and you're not going to like it at first. Every time you ask an audience if they have any questions, you're going to wait 10 seconds before you move on. Wait, here's the part you're not going to like. You're going to put your hands behind your back and actually count to 10 with your fingers. You're going to do this because if you count to 10 in your head, your internal clock will do the counting, and it's going to sound more like this: 1, 5, 10. For years, when I used to teach trainers at Xerox this method in a 5-day presentation skills program I taught, I watched it play out. When I mentioned they were going to wait 10 seconds and actually count it out behind their backs, many would subtly smirk as to the necessity of having to do this. I then took out a counter. I kept it on the lectern I spoke from, and I tell them, over the next 4 days, I'm going to count each time I get a question after at least 5 seconds of waiting, and I'll bet you I hit that counter at least a half a dozen times. In 5 years, I never lost that bet. I'm quite sure you're still thinking, 10 seconds sounds like a crazy length of time. What in the world could an audience actually be doing taking that long to ask a question? The answer is they're thinking. They're thinking about what you taught them. They're reflecting on how the information you presented relates to their world. They're putting the pieces of information you just gave them together, and all this takes time. Learning how to strategically pause when you ask a question in front of a group or or individual might just be the single most effective way to connect with your audience and establish real credibility. It starts with learning to ignore the false reads from your internal clock and use a more disciplined approach to slowing down. Once you do, you'll be far more credible when you're earning the trust of others, and you will demonstrate real, honest listening.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.